So this is one of the toughest talks I'll give in a long time because my wife is out here. I don't know if she's ever come to one of my talks before. You know, and I can go home and say, oh man, it was such a tough audience. I did this and this. Can't really say that now. She can hold me to the truth.
There were thousands of people there.
Yeah, and they were mean. So yeah, we're down. Our numbers are dropping, right? That's expected on afternoon of the last day. So I was here last year, and when I talked to Bill about coming, he asked me what my topic was, and I just, I can't remember what I threw out there. It was something about firefighter safety because I work in that a lot. But I've struggled the last 3 or 4 months to really try to come up with a story that's different than what I told you last year. How many of you were here last year? All right. So do you remember some of the things I talked about? One of the big ththat's was for every unit volume of fuel that burns, how many unit volumes of air do you need? About 5,000. So to me, that's a really telling metric. It helps explain a lot of the things that fire does and why it does that. So if you think for every basketball size volume of fuel that burns, you have to have 5,000 equivalent basketballs of air. You've got to have a lot of air movement around, right? And that has a big influence on how fires respond to slope and wind and changes in fuels, if you start thinking about that. So that's a fascinating metric that I love to talk about. And then, I talked about fires on slopes and fires with wind, but we're not going to do that today. So I cut back on all those engineering slides that I showed you last year, and I added a few others, but hopefully I got a message that's useful. So my goal is that you go away from this next 30 or 40 minutes here with something that helps you to do your job more safely and more effectively, and let's reduce the number of people who get injured out there. So risk. This is the definition I like to use. Hazard, and you can say it's the sum or the product of the hazard times the exposure, right? So everything, not everything, but most of the things we do in life are associated with risk. I mean, driving here for this conference or flying here, both of those had a hazard associated with it and a certain amount of risk. I was just thinking about that today. My wife and I drove from Montana. Part of the reason was we have a new grandbaby in Salt Lake that we wanted to see. I had a meeting in Provo, Utah that I wanted to take care of, and then I had a experimental site I wanted to look at in southern Utah. But, so that was the justification I used to drive. But I was just sitting here thinking this morning, and was it, you think about that hazard, the driving hazard, and whatever it is, 1,200 miles, the risk there, was that really worth it? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but everything we do is associated with the risk, and it's, to me, it's the hazard, either plus or times, I like the product, times the exposure. So you can have a low exposure, high hazard, and get the same risk as a low hazard and high exposure. All right, so let's just see, where are we killing people on fires? And you look at a couple data sets here, right? So, sorry, I don't know what I did, but hit something. There you go. So, there you go. 96 to 2006. So, it's kind of surprising. About 20 to 23% equally distributed among aviation, vehicles, and heart attacks, and then actual entrapments. And my definition of an entrapment is somebody got burned over, right? And then other. Interesting, though, if we move to another, whatever that is, 10 years, another 10-year period, we see some differences. We're doing better. Aviation accidents have decreased the number of fatalities. Vehicles decreased a little bit. We still have too many old fat guys like me going on fires, right? Heart attacks, but the other has gone way up quite a bit. And that's, if you look at, snag fatalities the last couple of years, you can understand why that is. Now, aviation. Paul was at the talk this morning, talked about his grandson. dying in an aircraft accident. I love to fly. I've been on fires, and somebody offers me a helicopter trip, I am all for that. I love to fly. And I'm thinking back over my career, and especially in Canada, the Canadians have a different set of rules for flying than we do down here. And I don't know, some of the helicopters I've flown in Canada, I don't know, maybe I should have said no to those trips. They were great and there were no accidents, but I should have said no. I love to fly, and I love road trips too. But maybe I need to think about, like this trip, is the hazard, the risk, worth the trade-offs, the opportunity to have some meetings and try to be more efficient. I don't know. So we're going to focus totally on entrapments. This is all I'm going to say about aviation and vehicles and heart attacks, other than as an agency and an organization and a culture or whatever you want to say, we need to continue to work to reduce fatalities from those other 3 and other 4 causes. So when I was sitting here in the audience last year, somebody was throwing up some numbers about acres burned, and then maybe the previous talk or something had talked about fatalities, and I was going to talk about that, and I got to thinking, well, is there a different way to present this data, right? How about fatalities per, or by year, right? But how about fatalities per 10,000 acres or per acres burned, 10,000 fires or acres burned? I just wondered what that looked like. So to do this study, I like to claim credit, but the guy that works for me, Wesley Page, this is I think an indicator of a late career person, is you have smarter people working for you. And I'll take total credit for Wesley's work. He gathered up all of the entrapment reports he could find from everywhere he could get access to. Came up with around 300. And then he went through those reports and gleaned and selected the reports that had an entrapment location, adequate information so you could pinpoint where the entrapment occurred, information about the weather and the fuels, and then other entrapment location attributes. What would you guess were the number of reports that had that information? Pretty basic information. Less than half. Less than half. So one lesson from this work was, if we truly want to learn from our accidents, we're not collecting the right data. We're not keeping track of it. That was really telling. It was less than half of these, whatever you want to call it, accident investigation reports, FLAs, whatever you want to call them, don't have sufficient data about the physical site, the conditions that led to the fire, and just measurements that you need to do a quantitative analysis. All right, let's look at this. Entrapments or fatalities per 100,000 acres burned. So if we look, I'll back up again. If you look at this, you'd say, well, generally we're probably doing better, right? And Matt Rom yesterday showed a different set of numbers. He showed that going up. Again, it's statistics. You can show what you want, right, with data. But this is just raw data, entrapments per year, and we're just talking entrapment fatalities. And maybe Matt was including other causes. Looking at entrapment fatalities, it's generally going down. Okay. Entrapments per 100,000 acres burned by year. So this is a different, again, if you back up, this goes from 1926. Here we're at 1992. It's because prior to 92, there wasn't sufficient data. It just wasn't enough to make this calculation, right? So I don't know. You can look at that and look kind of cross-eyed and say, maybe we're doing better. Is that better enough? I don't know, okay? How about entrapment rate per 10,000 fires? Actually slightly going up, or flat, right? Yep.
Can I ask a question about your data? Is the entrapment number based on a entrapment event, or the numbers of people that were entrapped in the event? I think that's...
This is a fatal entrapment event.
Event, whether there were 3 people?
Right, right. Yep. And maybe that could be attribute the difference too. So, okay, let's look at the next thing. So this, I don't know if I don't really like this one, but we're looking at average personnel per entrapment and then total entrapments. So kind of getting to the question you asked, right? So again, you know, if you look at total entrapments, it's flat. Average personnel per entrapment, maybe it's going down. I don't know if it's optimist or pessimist. This, I don't know what, I don't know what this means. Okay, so we're looking at interval. All right, so recurrence interval. How often an entrapment occurs with this many fatalities in it. So here you have Yarnell. And the last, I don't know what what gave it this 43-year interval, but it's a big interval, right? So, so one thing just looking at this graph is in many of our careers, we probably won't see a huge entrapment with a lot of fatalities, you know, on the order of 20 in our careers. But you could say in the order, you know, a career's last span, well, was it Tom, the guy that told stories yesterday? I can't remember. 55 years? 55 years, right? Yeah, amazing, right? So high likelihood he has seen his career, well, all of this, right? I don't know. I don't know how to interpret this other than it's within a 10-year time frame, we're going to see some, if we're based on past history, we're going to see some fatal and some entrapments with more than 10 people killed. That's what the data shows. So if we're weather forecasters, based it on persistence, it's going to keep happening. So I don't know. What is the story here? Are we doing better or not? What do you all think? I mean, I don't know. I'm not excited about these data. Not at all. I mean, it's to me, it says we have a lot of work to do as an organization. We can do better. Although here's another piece of information. Let's see, will I show that? Well, yeah, if we just go back to, you know, the big entrapment events are rare. And that's, okay, back to this. So we're looking here, let's just look at this number. Half, so we're 0.05, even up here where we are, 0.05 entrapments per 10,000 fires. Or, this is even more telling, less than 0.1 fatal entrapments per 100,000 acres burned. So maybe we are successful. That's a rare event. Wouldn't you say that? I mean, I'd say it's a really rare event. I mean, we're looking at less than a half per 10,000 fires and 0.1 per 100,000 acres burned. I think that's, so this is something else. I mean, I'm just food for thought here. I don't know what we do with this. I mean, what can we do better? Maybe we can't do anything better. You could interpret this and say we are doing really well. I don't know, right? But that, to me, that says it's a pretty rare event to get a fatal entrapment. But then you look at this data, and you're going to see in 10 years, you're going to see one, right? We see enough acres burned. All right. It's just another way to cut the cake, if you will, and look at the data. Where are the most dangerous locations? Okay, so the size of the circles are the number of personnel entrapped. Okay, and then the color is fatality or not. Red being yes, there's a fatality. Blue, no fatality, but an entrapment. I mean, we could have all probably guessed this, right? The West is more dangerous than the East. And California, Northern Rockies, there's a lot of entrapments, but the red ones, where there's a fatality, are fairly rare, still too often for us. But I don't know how to interpret this other. It's just again, food for thought, looking at it. So we're just trying to, we were trying to understand if there's some trends here, right? And, yep, question in the back, Peter?
Yeah, Bret, have you thought about looking at it through the lens of hours of exposure? Like we heard yesterday from Sean and Dukas that if we fly at 60,000 hours of flight time, then we're starting to get into that area where we may be having fatalities. Has anybody looked at it from?
We haven't looked at that. I would just, I've thought about that. It's just harder to get that data. 100, person days worked or something like that, or number of people. I don't know. Yeah, there's certainly other ways to continue to look at that, right? But we haven't yet. Yeah, that's coming. Maybe next year I'll have that. All right, so, okay, I don't know what to say more about this, but there is a little bit more information here, right? So part of that study, so, we gathered 300, less than half of them, 300 studies, 300 reports, whatever you call them, less than half had sufficient data to build. What we wanted to build really was a statistical model of predicted entrapment probability as a function of environmental conditions, fire attributes, that kind of thing, right? That was the goal. Well, this is some of the outcome from that model. So we're looking at GAC, right? So Rocky Mountain, South Ops, North Ops. This room is familiar with those, very familiar. Southwest, Great Basin, Northwest, Northern Rockies, and then the Southern Eastern. So let's just, I guess you guys are probably most interested on these two, South Ops, North Ops, right? And what we have here is ERC, Energy Release Component, and Burn Index from the NFDRS, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that more. Matt Jolly, if you're not aware, at the Fire Lab is coming out with, calls it severe fire potential, I think. But it's just showing some really good, promising capability to predict when we are going to be in a really dangerous situation. So, and I'll give you a link for that at the end here. So anyway, if you look at ERCBI, and then we've got percentiles, right? So if you get up in the 75th to 100th percentile, again, that's probably, it's not what we wouldn't expect. You get dry and hot and dry fuels, and then you're going to have higher rate of entrapment. So that's entrapment rate per 10,000 fires. That's going to go up, and it's associated with slope. That's something we really didn't have in the past, but again, you'd expect from fire experience. Steeper slopes, drier conditions, you're going to have higher rate of entrapment. So this is just, again, trying to quantify what we all know qualitatively. All right, so here, I mean, I love this. This is really cool. I'm excited about this, if you can't tell. So Wesley did some statistical magic, and that's all I can really explain. So he's looking at, it's called a term called maximum entropy. And entropy is really a metric of how disorganized something is. But there's this statistical process that you calculate maximum entropy for a data set, and it's, I don't know, again, it's randomness or something. And so we, from a subset of those data, those reports of entrapments, right, we pulled them for California, we're trying to identify what is the most dangerous location in this state. Most dangerous location, all right? So, and then, so you just, the colors, the redder the color, the more dangerous the location. So you look at this, and we identified from that study the most dangerous, they're called HUCs. It's hydraulic, I don't know, boundaries or something, but it's basically drainages. We identified the most dangerous one, and it's this, Water Canyon. Do any of you know Water Canyon north of Santa Barbara? About 10 miles north. That location, that drainage from this statistical model is the most dangerous drainage in the state. Okay, so if you're on an incident management team, this area is in your boundary of concern. Would we do anything different? Would you do anything different in terms of sending crews in there? What do you, I don't know, what's, what?
Yeah, if you're knowing you have that knowledge.
I mean, it's a simple answer, right? You would, right? Hopefully you would. Why wouldn't you, right? I mean, that's all I'm asking. And I mean, our hope is that we do this for the entire country and produce a map or some type of metric, right? So that you can say, well, for this drainage, this is what we're looking at today, or for you know, our fire assignment. This is how it ranks on the Wesley Page Severity Entrapment Potential Index. Maybe we need to change our tactics. I mean, that's where we're headed with this, right? So just remember, if you're taking notes or not, write down Water Canyon if that's on your fire. Maybe don't send people in there unless you absolutely have to. I don't know. It's just interesting that fell out. Out of analyzing the whole state, millions of acres, that drainage was absolutely the worst one in the state. Okay.
That's based on topography, fuels.
Topography, fuels, aspect. So taking all those entrapment reports, looking at what attributes cause the highest risk, and yep, and then applying that building a statistical model off of that, and then applying that to the entire state and saying, okay, this drainage right here is the most dangerous one in the state. Highest potential for entrapment is right there. Yep.
I've just been introduced to it. I've got a trainee working with me this year that's using some GIS layer that is like timber stand information to identify, very similar to this, which ridges are the best ridges to use based on the timber stands, the number of stands on the trees. And it's something that we're going to play with this year. It also has a model to be able to tell you where you have your paramedics and where you have your crews. It'll give you the time distance. It has to be ground truth, obviously. Yeah. But it's just a model that you can run. It will give you the time distance between point A and point B, between the EMT or paramedic and where the crews are, because it all goes into 206 WF. But the one thing that this guy's going to be working with me on is that the timber cover layer that will actually give you a percentage chance of which ridge is better than another ridge to be able to locate a line. So it seems like it's kind of similar to this. It's not the same, obviously, but there's just some tools out there that I think are going to be helpful to have that discussion between the safety officers and the officers.
Right.
And it's not cut and dry. It still needs to be verified and boots on the ground and the whole thing. But it might be able to help the ops folks decide plan A, plan B, which ridge is the best.
Yep.
You know, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah.
If you want to send me an email about that more, maybe we could.
I will.
Yep.
So what's the fire history?
I don't know. Wesley would probably know. He came from the Cleveland, but I don't know. I mean, north of Santa Barbara, that's probably.
It's east of Santa Maria off of Highway 166, that fire a couple years ago.
Yeah.
This is one other. So I don't have a copy of this, but at the end I'm going to hand out some sheets that have my contact information. If you want this, I mean, I love this, right? So we can come up with a rule of thumb here, but deployment zone size for 95% survival rate with a shelter. If you have a shelter and you accept a 5% chance that you won't survive, then this is your deployment zone size. Now, I have resisted my whole career talking about deployment zones, but this is based on those 150 whatever actual reports that had sufficient information. So I don't know. We could look at it's a function of flame height and slope steepness. So I just looking at this last night. Okay, if we said flame height minus slope steepness, feet to percent, gives you deployment zone size in feet. Something. So you say 50 minus 20, you get 30. That works for all three. But that just shows that there's certain. Again, we expect an effective slope, and it's most. There's lots of data that shows above 30% slope, fire behavior changes totally. That's just something we should all have in the back of our mind. But deployment zone size, anyway. I don't know what you do with that, but we shouldn't be building deployment zones, but that's deployment zone size. And many times I think our safety zones are actually deployment zones, if that. Is that acres? That's in feet. That's it. That's in feet.
30 square feet, is that so?
That's feet. That would be like radius or diameter, which one you're more acceptable with.
But that's for one person.
That's one person. Yeah. I mean, that just fell out of that statistical model, right? Okay, time of blow up. This is from the Lessons Learned Center. So it's just, it's on their site. They have to search a little bit to find it. So here they've got a list of fires and the time that the fire blew up, right? So we're looking at 1400 to 1630. Okay, then there's another one that says time of burnover. So all of those fires are associated with an entrapment. And so you have time of burnover. So that, you know, you can expect what the next one will be is blow up to burnover. So I want to call that decision time, maybe? Yep, Fred?
Those are critical, to me, the critical one is the blow up the burnover. You look at Yarnell Hill, 52 minutes. They argued over the radio. We call it their discussing our options conversation.
Yep, 30 mile, 50 minutes. They were sitting there on a rock watching that fire come up the canyon towards them, talking about, what should we do with our shelters? Where should we go? You know, the river's right here, the rock scree's there. Well, I don't know, where do you think? Where should you go? Anyway, 50 minutes. Again, I mean, one thing I take from this is, I don't know, but that 2 to 4 p.m., that's a bad time to be getting on the mountain. And should we do something different? I mean, should we change this? So let's think about this. If we were a manufacturing company, something, building widgets, and you're having a major failure every 100,000 widgets, right? So let's say we're something like that, major failure, and it's costing the company millions of dollars. All right, so do they move ahead saying, well, we just have to factor that into our prices, or do we need to change things up? Now, the talk this morning by, I'm terrible with names, right there. What's your name? Lindsay. Lindsay, yes. The aviation industry has done this. They've done it, right? It was unacceptable, the failure rate of aircraft in the 70s and 80s, and I don't remember, I was alive, I don't remember a lot of crashes in, but whatever the number, it was unacceptable. They made some major changes, and they've reduced that fatality rate, or that or whatever, that crash rate, whatever you want to call that. Maybe it's time for the wildfire organization to do a major overhaul. I don't know. I think it is. We've had, I just had discussion with Fred, had discussions with other people here. Man, we just can't make change. Why aren't we, what's not changing, or this isn't happening, or they're covering up this. Well, I don't know who the they is, but something's not changing. That's all I'm saying. Something is not changing, and it needs to if we really want to save lives. Now, there's that new bill, Cantwell, Murkowski. Are you aware of that? This passed. It's going to have major impacts on wildland fire operations. Major, huge. Potential that maybe we can actually realistically expect a zero entrapment rate. I mean, we're still going to have driving, aviation, heart attacks, but maybe zero entrapment rate. So everybody has to, basically, you're going to have drones on fire and identify where the crews are all the time. If you have drones overhead, they've got IR cameras. You can see where the fire is all the time. That's the only time I think when we can actually expect zero fatalities is if we know where the fire is and we know where all the crews are and they know where the fire is all the time. Then maybe we can say we can get to zero entrapments. Okay. So, past that. Sorry, my time is, actually I still have an hour left. Nobody started the clock.
Brett, what was that you were saying? The bill, or what you just mentioned, what was it?
Cantwell, Murkowski. So it was Senator Cantwell, Cantwell. Yeah, I think it was just signed. Cantwell, Murkowski, out of Washington State.
Can you talk about, what is it in a nutshell, the bill?
So it was, I want to say it precipitated by TWISP, and then the major fires they had in Washington. So it's a Washington State senator, anyway, yeah. And she pushed it last year, and it got hung up in committee, and then her and Murkowski have continued to push. I don't know the first names. Continue to push it forward. So, I mean, there's fundings for some pet peeve projects in Washington and Oregon, that type of thing. But part of it is a major revision of how we how we work on fires, manage fires. And one of the things I read was, and if you just look at Google, it comes right up. IR cameras and drones are required, GPSs on all crews, that report back, so kind of sense that kind of thing. Okay, just a quick review here of safe separation distance models, SSD models, because that's what I'm all about is safety, right, and safety zones, right? So the current one is 4 times the flame height, and if you knew the science behind that, you would throw that out the door. I'm just telling you. It's a undergraduate engineering project that I did when I was first hired with the Forest Service. So it's just looking at radiant heat transfer, simulating the flame as if it was a solid steel plate, and how far the energy is transmitted from that steel plate. And it's with the technology I had at the time, that was the best thing that I could do. Prior to that, there was nothing in terms of quantitative guidelines on what constitutes a safe separation distance or a safety zone. Okay, 4 times the flame height. The next thing is we've done direct measurements. We've gone to fires, and maybe some of you have been on fires. We show up and say, we beg and plead with the incident management team, can we go out on the fire, stand in front of the flames, put some sensors out there, come back. Our sensors measure how much energy released, and then we can calculate from that basically how far you need to be from those flames to prevent burn injury. Now this is minimum, right? It's not going to be comfortable, but 2nd degree burns in 90 seconds. That's our threshold. All right, so grasses, you need about, 10 feet. Shrubs, about 22 feet. Anyway, down to crown fires. And then there's a statistical model. I don't know why I can't say that word. Statistical model, right? That's based on the work that I kind of just described that Wesley was working on, right? So we've got some guidelines here. And just for time's sake, I won't go into those, but they're on this little summary sheet I have. And then we have a computer model, right? So there's 3 or 4 different options for safe separation distance. This is where we're headed, for good or worse, but this is the best I've come up with yet, is safe separation distance. So safety zone size is this calculation. So 8 times the vegetation height times this factor that comes out of this table where you have slope and wind speed. All right, and then you also pick the number based on the fuel height. Sorry, you probably can't see that orange. I hate that, and I apologize. All right, so I just go through this, and there's a mistake in this one. Let's just say this one, so there's no mistakes. 20-foot tall juniper, 38% slope, 20 miles an hour wind. Okay, 20 mile an hour wind, we're down here, right? 38% slope, we're up here. So you get out there, and 20-foot tall, which is the orange, so we get a factor of 3. So 8 times 20 the veg height times 3, come up with the 480 feet, about 16 acres. I don't know. I worry that on the high end, this is way over predicting, but that's what the numbers show right now. So how many times have you seen a 16-acre safety zone? Okay, let's say that the numbers are wrong, and they might be up by 50%, but I don't think they're up by 90%. So let's cut that in half, 8 acres. How often have you seen an 8-acre safety zone? Maybe once in a while, right? A big meadow or something. So what are the implications here for strategy and tactics? Do we have safety zones? Most often not, right? That's the conclusion. Whether Butler's numbers are off by 50%, it's still a big safety zone, whatever. Or it might be huge if I'm under-predicting, right? Anyway. Okay, the last thing I want to kind of talk through, and I don't know, again, the clock's not working. I don't know how I'm doing on time, you guys, but escape routes. Okay, so I don't know how we got as an agency, how we got ourselves into this situation. Any safety zone is no good without an escape route. And any escape route is no good without someplace to go. It's like we shot ourselves in the foot, right? We think they're separate, but neither one is. It's like we need a whole new term that includes both. But so, escape routes. How many of you know how fast crews travel? And you can say, well, I think they can travel like this. But interestingly enough, there's what's called hiking functions. Hiking functions. That's a function of slope, so terrain steepness, and travel rate. So we're looking at this, let's look at this Tobler one, which is really popular based on some work in 1993. That was 1 or 2 Irish guys hiking over the hills in Ireland. And they thought, wow, we'll keep track of how fast we can hike. That's what that's based on. A couple of Irish guys hiking over the hills. That's it. I'm telling you, it's crazy, isn't it? And you look at the other models, they're similar. The Naismith, Langmuir, the Davy, Ross, this immature, they're all about that. You know, maybe one of them has 5 or 6 people. The only one that's different is this work that, it's a group I'm working with out of University of Utah. So we recruited 30 or 40 individuals, sent them down south at Salt Lake, down in the desert there up against the foothills. Had them follow some tracks through the juniper and sagebrush and just pointed them a direction, no trails, and then timed how fast they could travel, right? As a function of different slopes. So that's this Campbell model. So where we're headed, we're trying to understand, quantify how fast crews can travel. So then we can say, if you're at this location, your safety zone is here, this is how long it'll take you to get there. That's where we're headed for, right? So I could take a little bit of credit for this. I mean, so I don't know, last winter or something, I was reading something that talked about Strava database. Do any of you use Strava? It's an app. What does it do?
It tracks stuff. It tracks, it'll give you a track log on where you've been and how much time, and actually how much energy you use here as well.
Yeah. I mean, I heard about that. I thought, can we get to that data? And this Mickey Campbell, who's a grad student, I talked to him. He said, I don't take a look at it. And he talked to Strava, and they said, yeah, well, as long as we're not sharing any personal information, you can have the database. And so we did it for the Wasatch Front. Got like 300,000 individual tracks, right? And then Mickey did his magic GIS stuff and pulled out, slope of the track they were on and quality. And then we had to do some filtering because some of them were cars where somebody left their app on while they're driving to and from. Some were bicycles, anyway, pulled all that information out and ended up with still like 100,000 data points. And so the lines here are percentiles, and then the black are all data points. And if it's black, so they're 0.1% opacity, so it's black. There's 100 data points right on top of the same location, right? So if you look at this, there's a huge variation in travel rates, right? Huge variation. Huge variation. And so we're gonna go to the next slide. So the black here is all the data, and then the lines are the percentiles, right? So then here's those hiking functions overlaid on top of those percentile lines, right? And we just picked, it happens to be a curve fit that kind of works for this. It's called Lorentz. It's just a curve fit name, right? All right, so how do we interpret this data? So this is the point we're at right now, is we have this data set. We have these hiking functions. And I'm legitimately asking you, where do you think most of our fire crews, let's say type 1, this type 1 fire crews fit in terms of percentile in hiking rates? 50%, 80 percentile? Are they down here with the slow fat guys with me? Probably not. I mean, we can cut out that, I think, but where do you think? I don't know. What do you guys think? 80? I mean, I'll buy that. I don't know. Probably. So I'll just add this year. So these two professors I'm working with out of the University of Utah and Fort Lewis College now out of Durango, we got a hold of some hotshot crews. And maybe some of you saw this. I don't know. We tried nationally to reach out to everybody and asked them if they would at least carry a GPS when they did their spring training with them, and then we can just keep track of, we know where they are, but just one attribute, just trail quality, something like that, right? It would have been nice to get like fitness level of the crew, but that makes it too complicated, and then you're not going to get any data back. So right now, we're tracking travel rates of Type 1 crews in their training exercises. They'll help us identify where these crews fall on these hiking functions from Strava, right? Again, where we're going is try to provide to the fire community some idea, quantitative information, how fast you can get from your location to whatever you've identified as a safety zone, whether it's a bus or it's your buggy or whether it's a Walmart parking lot. Okay, just a little bit more to look at. If you look at this, let's just pick one line. Let's say 90th percentile right here. Okay, so first of all, you don't travel the fastest on flat. You travel fastest on about a 5% downslope. I didn't know that. That's a little bit interesting, right? Let's say you've got a 20% downslope, 20 degrees downslope. Right here, we'll go to there. You got about, 2.5 meters per second travel rate. That seemed high to me, but that's what it came out. How about upslope? So if we go 20 degrees upslope and 90th percentile, we're about just 1.25. So about half the speed going downhill, the same slope as half the speed going uphill as you would be going downhill. If I was ops or crew member or hotshot soup or something, I would tuck that away to say to my crew, okay, we have an escape route here. It's this steep, up or down. This is about the rate we can travel at. I don't know. That's where we're headed, okay? This is kind of where we'll go. So I'll end here with another couple slides with some tools. One of the tools were available. I can send it to you now if you want it. It's an app. It'll go on iPhones or Androids, and it calculates safety zone size based on that table I showed you back there. So number of people, number of vehicles, slope, wind, fire intensity. It'll give you a size, and if you have connectivity, it'll show you on the map what that looks like. Where we want to go with that is also have it look for safety zones, or you identify a safety zone, and then it would find the optimum travel path to get there, okay? So that's where we're headed, and it would look maybe something like this, where the travel paths are colored by time to get there or something. So I'll tell you what that is. Right? Okay, just a quick summary of 2 more studies. Again, so if you're keeping notes, a spotting study. So we got some money from Joint Fire Science Program to look at ember transport, and how does ember transport affect spot fire growth? Spot fire ignition, spot fire growth. That's a really tough problem. There's a reason why the question hasn't been answered. So we went out on fires and put out equipment to measure embers coming over, and just weren't successful. So what we ended up doing is grabbing the IR images from the overflights, right? And then from those, day to day, you could look at, okay, what new starts occurred in front of the fire, and you could tell they were spot fires, right? And then calculating how far did the embers go to generate those spot fires. And generally, so that the bottom line, the take-home message from that study was that ember transport models, if they come from Farsight or FlamMap or whatever favorite tool your GIS fire behavior analyst shop is using, are probably underpredicted. Ember spotting distances are at the high end of the models. That's what the actual dot distances are at the high end of the models. Okay, so that's a take-home message. The other one was, so we were asked to look at how accurate does weather forecast data need to be? Do we need to be within 5 degrees on temperature, within plus or minus 5% on relative humidity? That was the question, right? And how did that accuracy affect fire behavior model accuracy? All right, so we gathered for the entire year 2015, the entire country gathered up all of the weather station data we could find from ROD stations and everything that was available online, and a huge data set, terabytes, right? And then we compared that, so those measurements are the truth. We compared that to the forecast data for that same location, right? To see, okay, how accurate were those forecasts in terms of actually predicting what happened at that location. And the thing that really fell out is, and we're continuing this, is that high wind events are underpredicted. for many, not all forecast offices, but many, high wind events are underpredicted. All right, so that's pretty critical when we're talking about, especially you guys down here. High wind events are a major factor in a lot of your big fires, right? High wind events are underpredicted, and so we're continuing with that, and we're trying to identify, okay, which shops and why is it? And generally, I'll get to you in just a minute. Generally, the indications are high wind events may be associated with thunderstorm outflows, but it could also be the Santa Ana winds like that. So we're trying to isolate down these, are there specific high wind events or not? And which, maybe GACs, or which locations have that bias?
How far out was that forecast? Like 24 hours out or 48 out? Like when you say it's forecast, what time?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it was 24 hours. Yeah, that's a good question. Yep. And that's, if you go to firelab.org, I think that paper is available if you want to look into that more. So, two things. Ember transport models are underpredicting ember distances, spotting distances, and high wind events are underpredicted, just generally. Okay, new tools. WISE, Wildfire Safety Evaluator. I mean, we're like, I think I said this last year, we're this close. We are. I can send it to you right now if you just send me an email. It just runs on your phone, right? There are just a couple glitches we're trying to iron out. And again, it's in beta because we're still trying to nail down those numbers that go in that table, but I don't know, you probably should use it. Wind Ninja. How many here know what Wind Ninja is? A lot of you. You should have it. There's a mobile version. You should look at it. It's simple to use. Anybody here that has it, do you think it's hard to use? No, we have worked hard. It is simple to use. So it gives you a picture, like a Google Earth picture with vectors on it, little arrows on it, shows you what the winds are doing. And we're doing some major updates in it that make it, introducing more physics into the mobile version. You should have it. You should use it. Look at your location. You can see what the winds are doing. Wind Ninja and Wind Ninja Mobile, right? Wind Ninja is the laptop version. Wind Ninja Mobile is the device version. Fire weather alert system. And this is on this. Let me get this going around. So I won't pass it around. I'll just put them up front here. So I've got fire. So let me talk about that. Fire weather alert system. So this is you can set this up as an automatic. Let's say you're worried about in your location. Just tell me, for Southern California, is there a trigger point in RH that you look for? RH trigger point. 15%, 20% that you get below where things change? Single digits. Okay, 9%. Right, so you can load this on your phone, and it doesn't, nothing runs on the phone, it just goes to a server, right? But say, for my location, let's say Cleveland for us, right? I want to know, and you draw out an area, whatever, 50-mile radius around your location, or pick a location. I want to know when a forecast from the Weather Service predicts RH below 9%. I want to know when temperature is to exceed whatever, 103 degrees, and when wind speed is going to exceed 15 miles an hour, right? So it will monitor the forecast data, and it'll send you a notification when any forecast exceeds any of your settings, right? Any of your trigger points. What does this do? All it does is frees you up from having to monitor the forecast all the time, right? That's all we're doing. But I mean, it's pretty nice to have. To really have that, and it sends you the update. I mean, it sends you the alert. Look, for your location, RHs are predicted to get to 6% tomorrow. So, fire weather alert system. This is Matt Jolly's deal. Severe fire weather alert, ERCBI maps. It's at that location. You should be looking at that. There's some strong correlations between that, we're showing right now, between that and entrapments and dangerous fire conditions. All right? So I have all of that information, those models, and here's just some summary data are on this one sheet, single sheet. I've got on the left-hand side just some observations about, some background and what things you should look for under different conditions and why. slope effects, safety zone size, and then I've got a summary on different models if you like the 4 times flame height or the direct measurements or the statistical model, or this is where we're going, all of that with an example. And then for those tools, Wind Ninja Mobile, Fire Weather Alert, they're all right here, okay?
Is the safety zone thing on there as well?
That's this table right here. Okay, and then in addition to that, I got my business cards, and now that emails are changing, right? So they're outdated, but on the back of my card is that table. All right? Table's on the back of my card. So I'm not going to take these, right? So take them and, pass them out. Use them for whatever you want. Okay? So let's wrap this up. This is Gus. And Suzanne and I could tell you some stories about Gus. He's our third son. We have 4 boys. And he drives me crazy. He does. He drives me crazy. He's total opposite of me. He loves to talk. I don't talk. And he can spend hours talking to somebody about, why you wear these certain pants or not. Gus worked on a local crew for 3 years. And then last year he was on the Lewis and Clark. And he got a girlfriend. And then, so, I don't know. I'm really not disappointed. Not disappointed, okay? I had a different opinion, but Gus dropped off the crew in August, and he's married now. So I don't know if that's success or not. I think it's success, right? But Gus he got his EMP, right? And he's going to continue, he wants to stay involved in Wildland Fire. And so I'm just bringing it back home. You all have people who are near and dear to you. I know you do. We all do, right? We don't want any of them to get hurt on a fire. I don't want Gus, as much as he drives me crazy, to get hurt. I love that kid. I do. He's 22 years old, and I love him. But he could easily be on one of your fires. And let's really, we got to make right decisions. Is it worthwhile to have people where they are? What are the risks? Again, back to the hazard times the exposure. What are the risks, right? So, anyway, yeah, thanks for your time. And we love coming to this. My wife, when I told her, well, there's that meeting in San Diego, do you want to go? She loves the pool here. She does. So, yeah, that was another reason to come, Bill. So, yeah, thanks for letting me come. Yes, Brad.
Quick question. As always, really admire the work that you're doing and what Wesley Page is doing. I'm really excited to see it develop. 2 questions, actually. The first is, have you considered, so I've heard both you and him say that you want this certain kind of data so that you can crunch it and do the quantitative analysis that you want to do, and that you're not finding it in the investigation reports. I guess my question number 1 is, have you considered maybe building out a list of this is, here are 10 key pieces of data that we would like to see in every report, and then forwarding that to a steering committee so that, because I know when I'm doing an investigation, we know what the PPE guys want, so we try to get that to them. We know what these folks want, so we try to get that to them. And, are your needs well known to that group? That's question 1. And question 2 is, so the real value of building something like that would be to start collecting data now that we could do, that folks who do 20 years worth of investigations, and it may not be you or Wesley, but some young buck that nobody's heard of yet, that's going to crunch these numbers in 20 years. So I guess the creative question is, what are the data points that might be relevant 20 years from now? If you were to dream for a moment and say, this is what I think 20 years of these data points could be valuable, what do you think you would want to put on that list?
Okay, so you're asking an old guy to remember 2 questions in a row. So that's a failure on your part. Yeah. The list is so that all went in a journal paper. The list is there. So there's a big chasm between research and operations. I feel like many times I'm standing on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, waving at somebody on the south rim and yelling, saying, hey, I've got this, don't buy that hot dog at the stand because it's not good or something. Anyway, it's really difficult for us trying to figure out how to span that gap. And one of the ways we do it is just by coming to meetings like this and talking about our work. But in that paper, we have that list. And yes, we're working with the Fire Behavior Subcommittee, NWCG Subcommittee, to try to figure out how to implement that into FLAs, whatever you want to call, whatever reports come out of incidents, right? Okay, question one. Question two, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think, so I like science, right? I'm the engineer, right? So you got to have the quantitative data to back out why the fire did what it did. Weather, fuels, terrain, location, safety zone size, almost never is there that, pictures. But then you got to think, I don't know, down the road, what have we been talking about here the last 3 days? Not much about physics, mostly about humans, right? And so I don't know, Brad, how we do this, but I bet you, not even 20 years, in 5 years, we're going to be saying now, why were these people, and we're asking that now, why were they thinking what they did, but how do we quantify that they were thinking what? Somehow we got to back out, I don't know, why humans are doing what they're doing. I don't know. That's a wild guess, right? Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, yep. Uh-huh.
This safety zone, talking about, you were talking about the 8 times the safety. Will we ever see that? I mean, is that an accepted one, or because I know we talked about that before, that you're trying to push out there, and would you ever see that in an RPG?
I hope so. I hope it comes up in the next round. So the last update was this year, right? Was this past fall, and I don't know, anybody involved in that RPG? You know how hard it is to make a word change in that thing? It's like an act of Congress. I mean, I actually had a couple sentence changes. Oh no, you can't. No, you can change this word, but no, not a sentence, right? So it's crazy. But the goal is that in the next update, which is, I don't know, 2 years out or something, that will be in there. So what I'm really trying to do is build the technical peer-reviewed foundation, right, for that table, right? And so I've got a couple papers that are just in review right now and just about completed that I publish, and then I can say, okay, these numbers make sense, right? So that's kind of, yeah.
And your research shows was you've done the quantitative.
Yeah, so this is the problem, right? We have quite a few measurements in low-intensity fires. That's where, either prescribed fire managers or incident management teams are comfortable with us. So first of all, what would you do if you're IC on a fire? We show up in a couple of trucks. We're from the fire lab. We want to get out in front of the fire, put some gear out, and first of all, we have to be there within an hour of the fire reaching it, right? Because the gear only runs for so long. Then come back out, let it burn over. Then we want to go back in to a timber stand where you've got potentially snags and drag it out. It's really hard to get those types of measurements in high-intensity fires. So that model, I feel like it fails at the high end. Steep slopes, strong winds. And those are the conditions where we don't have like one data point or no data points, right? So that's really I know they're off, and so I'm just trying to figure out how can I tune that. Yeah. All right. We've talked about that many, many, many times. Yep, and you just haven't came up with a logistically feasible method to do. We have talked about that a lot. More likely you could drop a researcher off the helicopter. Yeah, but we have talked about that a lot. Somebody will come up with a way to do that.
And are you doing any more research? A couple of years ago, you talked about the spear moving ahead of the fire, the gases, or here that will reach out far ahead. Are you guys still doing stuff with that?
Still convective heating. Yep, right. So that's when I talk about flame attachment. I mean, it really is amazing. If you get above 30% slope, and this is with no wind, 30% slope, the depth of the flame, I mean, So back to that 5,000 units of air for every unit of volume of fuel that burns, right? So if you think of it, we've got a fire here, all around the outside, you've got to have equivalent of 5,000 units of air coming in. But if, say, we put that fire on a slope like this, then the terrain starts to block the in out the air, right? So you get, and the air pressure is totally just the number of molecules present. So if you block a few molecules from getting in there, then you get a slightly low pressure and the flames get pushed down to the slope, right? That's where the 5,000 comes in. As soon as you push the flames down against the slope, all of the fuels are eventually immediately ignited, right? So it about explodes. You get a much deeper flame, much higher energy release rate, that kind of thing. So it really comes down to just, in addition to the heat being propagated, the gases are propagated up ahead of the slope. And I have a really, I think it's an awesome story about carbon monoxide poisoning. I mean, that I could keep you enthralled for an hour easy talking about that. But if you ever get a chance, I'd be glad to tell you about it. But carbon monoxide is one of those gases, and that stuff is lethal. Totally. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So that whole heat and gases are propagated in the presence of slopes, up the slope, a long distance. And so let's introduce winds into that. So if you have slope and winds, that critical slope, say 30% without winds, is only going to get lower with winds, right? You're going to get that attachment at lower winds, at lower slopes. Does that make sense?
Next year, come back with a carbon.
Okay. All right. Great. Are we out of time? I'm sure we are.
We got all the time in the world, right? Now, I think we've got enough time if you need to take a couple more questions.
Ted?
Hey, I just wanted to clarify, you did mention it's the John Dingell Conservation Management and Recreation Act that was signed in January 2019, totally without any input from Wildland Fire on any count. You were correct. Makowski is the sponsoring senator, but if you really want to look that up, you got to look it up under John Dingell Recreation Conservation. It's Senate Bill 47.
Thanks.
And then when you get in it, it's about 100 miles long. And what you're really looking for is section 1114. Write that down.
600 plus pages.
It's on, what you're looking for is like on page 37 if you print it out. So, and yeah, we don't know how to deal with it yet from the federal side. We're still kind of reeling from, holy crap, where'd this come from? But it talks about mandatory UAS programs within 180 days. 2 years, within 2 years, you have to have mandatory tracking of all fire resources on type 1 fires at a minimum. It talks about updating WFDS, applying smoke monitors, air advisors on fires, and what's the other one? Revamping predictive services so that they can tell us where fires are going to start. So yeah,
Well, that's not
some
a
great
problem to
language, great language in there.
What is it, Senate Bill what?
It's the Senate Bill 47. It's John D. Dingell Conservation Management and Recreation Act.
Fred, did you have a last question?
I do, well, yeah, and a comment. So I thought of one of the data points that's clearly lacking in all these investigations, FLAs, RLAs, learning reviews, is the truth. Because on almost every one of them where there's a fatality involved, and I got this from being on an investigation myself, we were told that the first thing they do is establish a conclusion and they get the facts to fit their conclusion. So the facts is, the truth is one of the data points that's missing.
Bullshit, right?
Thanks. All right. Thanks for the questions, and thanks for being here. Listen to me, you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bret.